Welcome to this explainer. Today we're jumping right into a dense, frankly unprecedented web of recent political events straight from the sources. We're going to start by unpacking a massive new lawsuit, and then we'll zoom out to look at the broader political and financial shifts completely reshaping the American government in 2026. If you want to understand exactly how high-stakes legal battles, immense sums of money, and executive power are colliding right now, you are absolutely in the right place. Let's get into it. Okay, let's kick things off with a number that is just staggering. $1.776 billion. That is the exact amount of taxpayer money proposed for a newly created fund. But here's the thing. It's not for infrastructure or education. It's specifically designed to pay off individuals convicted of crimes related to the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. This incredible figure and the intent behind it is the real spark for today's analysis and the dead center of a historic legal battle. Because our sources cover such a wide array of interconnected topics, here is our roadmap for today. We'll cover the billion-dollar lawsuit, revisit the events of January 6th, examine the legislative pushback, dive into some major financial and political moves, and finally, wrap up with the current state of loyalty in the GOP. Starting right off with Section 1, the billion-dollar lawsuit. So, on May 20th, 2026, Metropolitan Police Officer Daniel Hodges and former Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn officially filed suit to block the creation of this fund. They are directly naming President Donald Trump, Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent as defendants. Their ultimate goal is incredibly clear. They want to completely halt the distribution of this $1.776 billion. And to really grasp the severity of what they're claiming, you have to look at their explosive opening line. They state, quote, "In the most brazen act of presidential corruption this century, President Donald J. Trump has created a $1.776 billion taxpayer-funded slush fund to finance the insurrectionists and paramilitary groups that commit violence in his name." They aren't just calling this a bad policy, right? They are legally framing it as a direct violation of federal law and the Constitution. It's a massive escalation. Which brings us to Section 2, revisiting January 6th. Now, the lawsuit doesn't just casually mention January 6th. It actually lays out a very detailed, chronological map of the violence to establish strict legal context. It details how, starting at noon, rioters dismantled barriers. By 2 p.m., police lines were totally breached. The text describes hours of what it calls medieval-style hand-to-hand combat in an enclosed tunnel, complete with this terrifying heave-ho rhythm, flashbangs, and chemical spray as the police fought desperately to defend the Capitol. It grounds this huge macro event into a deeply personal reality for Officer Hodges. He was hit with a heavy object, kicked, had someone attempt to gouge his eyes out, and was nearly crushed between metal doors. Amidst all of that furious fighting, he recalled having this visceral, terrifying thought. This could be the end. So why bring this all up in the lawsuit? Well, Hodges and Dunn need to prove they have standing, meaning the legal right to actually bring the case. They argue that distributing these billions actively and directly endangers them. They claim the fund won't just compensate these individuals. It will empower people who send them death threats, arm militias like the Proud Boys, grant a legal stamp of approval to past violence, and dangerously signal to future perpetrators that they'll be financially rewarded. Moving on to Section 3, the legislative pushback. As you might guess, lawmakers are actively trying to fight back and reassert Congress's traditional power of the purse. Democrat Jamie Raskin introduced a specific bill designed to permanently prohibit federal funds from being used to pay off anyone claiming weaponization of the law by the government, which directly targets this billion-dollar pilot program. But you know, it's not just a partisan Democratic effort. Highlighting the intense distaste across the aisle, journalist Scott McFarlane noted that the fund is about as popular as poison ivy. What's truly fascinating here is the sheer silence from the GOP. Absolutely no one in the Republican Party is claiming ownership or offering public statements of support for this highly toxic proposal. So we're really seeing a multi-front opposition forming here. Beyond Raskin's bill, Democrats are demanding the DOJ preserve every single document related to the agreement. Plus, Senators Schiff, Durbin, and Blumenthal are heavily scrutinizing Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, questioning if he's actually following DOJ ethics advice. Meanwhile, legal commentators like George Conway are asserting that the administration is entirely ignoring its constitutional duties. That takes us to Section 4, financial and political moves. And here is another absolutely massive number causing an uproar. $220 million. That's the estimated value of stock in companies like Nvidia, Apple, Tesla, and Microsoft that President Trump reportedly bought and sold. The controversy highlighted by the sources isn't just the sheer amount of money, it's the timing. He was allegedly making these trades while simultaneously making public policy announcements that directly affected the value of those exact stocks. On top of that, and alongside plans for things like a literal Arlington Triumphal Arch, there was an attempt to secure $1 billion just to build a new East Wing ballroom. Republicans tried to slip this into a reconciliation bill, which is a big deal because it bypasses the filibuster and only needs 51 votes. However, Democrats in the Senate parliamentarian, Elizabeth McDonough, successfully halted it, citing a failure to follow proper procedural instructions. Well, after that procedural defeat regarding the ballroom funding, the executive response was incredibly swift. Trump posted a furious demand for Senate Republicans to fire the parliamentarian entirely and replace her with a loyalist. But he didn't stop there. He also demanded they force through the Save America Act, which restricts voting, and called for the complete elimination of the legislative filibuster to, quote, give us everything. Finally, let's look at Section 5, loyalty in the GOP. To put these political shifts into perspective, just look at the astronomical disparity in campaign spending right now. Normally, a House primary costs somewhere between $100,000 and $500,000, but a staggering $35 million in outside money was just spent to successfully oust incumbent Republican Thomas Massie. He was replaced by a Trump-backed challenger who publicly vowed total compliance to the president's orders. And we're seeing this exact same strategy replicated in the Senate. Down in Texas, in an incredibly expensive intra-party fight, Trump officially backed Ken Paxton over incumbent John Cornyn. This came only after Republicans had already incinerated roughly $100 million trying to oppose Paxton. Commentators have noted that Democrats are absolutely thrilled by this incredibly costly Republican infighting. Even with an approval rating hovering around 34%, Trump-backed candidates basically dominated the primaries in Kentucky, Georgia, Louisiana, and Alabama. Emboldened by purging incumbents who weren't deemed sufficiently supportive, White House spokesperson Stephen Chung posted an incredibly blunt warning online, demanding absolute deference to the president's political power, stating, "F around, find out." Pulling all of this together, political commentator Jessica Tarlov summarizes the overarching theme of these sources perfectly. She describes a current platform entirely centered around personal financial gain and absolute loyalty over traditional policy. The push for the $1.776 billion fund, the $220 million in stock trades, the demands to fire the parliamentarian, and the $100 million primary battles, they all funnel back to these core demands. So, as we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with a critical question to think about. We are watching a government under immense internal pressure, where the power of the purse, legal accountability, and party loyalty are shifting at lightning speed. How will these unprecedented maneuvers permanently alter the future operations of the American government? Think about the precedents being set here today. Thank you so much for joining me to break this all down. Keep asking questions, and as always, keep looking closely at the sources.